Let's Get Two presents
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here come the Astros, burning with desire. Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros, with winning on their mind. Here come the Astros, number one every time. Go, go, Astros!
We want Houston! We want Houston!
For the second time in 6 years, the Astros are baseball's best.
And now, Go Astros, a web series dedicated to the two-time world champs from H-Town, presented by three guys who remember Bob Nepper.
Good morning. It is Monday, January 9th. It is our first show of 2023 here for the Go Astros show. I'm here with James Christopher and Andy Tomchesson. And gentlemen, 2023 is a year in which the Astros have not won the World Series yet.
And we're off and running like Josh Hawley through the halls of Congress. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
I do not have any World Series gear on because I acknowledge that the year has changed. Unlike some people over there.
I don't have any Astros gear on, so you know.
Is that how you are, Andy? Or will you not wear? Are you done wearing? Because Jessica's like that.
No, not at all. No,
Okay.
not at all. I'll continue to wear it, and I will be one of those old men. For a long time, I was wearing my 2005 National League Championship hat with entertaining no questions about it. I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to wear it.
Jessica will stop wearing World Series gear when the first pitch of the season starts in March.
So
that's her.
it's important for me to torment local Yankee fans. So I'm quite happy to wear it.
Yeah.
You know, usually to synagogue in particular, where I will run into the most number of Yankee fans. So, you know, it is, you know, it has extra purposes when you live up here than it does elsewhere.
It's like
All
when
right,
I lived in Germany, I had the biggest Texas flag I've ever had on the wall. Like it's like kind of that thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It matters more when you're somewhere else, and it matters more in context of who you're around. And yeah, the Astros have made a really big trade and roster move here, moving into the 2023 season. They have acquired Bly Madris from the Tigers. Before that, he was with the Rays, I think, and possibly the Pirates, and possibly the. Andy, give me all your knowledge of Bly Madris.
There's the Bly on the 40-man roster now, which is I've been waiting to say since we acquired him in public, and it didn't land nearly as well as I wanted it to. So that's great. He actually has major league service time with Pittsburgh for, it looks like, 39 games this past season. He's a mixed bag kind of guy. He's older than every league he's played in by a little bit. He's had middling success. He plays all the outfield positions, a little bit of first base, probably DH. I don't think he does anything exceptionally well. If you're going to hope for lightning in a bottle, in Durham this past season, AAA for the Tampa Bay Rays, he posted a 1.053 OPS over 10 games. So, I mean, it's a small window, but we don't want to look at the major league window because that was not great. And so far in Mexico, playing for Monterrey, has not lit up the world. My guess is he is competition for Jake Myers, and also you got to have guys playing in Sugarland. I mean, you just have to. So
That is the rule. Yeah, we have to have guys play.
You do have to field all 9 positions in Sugarland.
This is more Bly Madris knowledge than I expected this morning. I expected to hear something like he is a baseball player.
Well, he was successful at Mesa State back in 2017.
What round draft pick? Wasn't he like a top 10 draft pick though? Like
9th round.
9th round. Okay. So maybe there's something.
He's always been a little bit older. So he got out of college when he was 21. And so he's not, I don't think anybody's fooling themselves into well, I say that Astros Twitter probably is in some corner fooling themselves into thinking that he will be replacing everybody in the outfield somehow. I've seen every position open in the outfield over the break. So, I mean, he's a guy that's going to fill roster spots. I think Robel Garcia is a nice comp except he's going to play the outfield instead of not play shortstop well. But I think he would also
so we're not expecting
not play shortstop well.
Yeah.
We're not expecting, like when we got Aledmus Diaz, everybody realized, hey, he was rookie of the year not that long ago. There was an opportunity for him to be.
No, I personally am expecting him to be non-tendered at some point around May or June. But in the meantime, he's going to be part of your fighting Sugarland Space Cowboy franchise team outfield bench.
I'm just glad that because didn't Captain Bligh the guy who took over the Seahawk in the famous?
This was the reference I was going for. Thank you. Yeah, that's the only.
Michael Curtiz.
You will eventually get the reference. That's a Go Astros podcast guarantee.
We'll beat it to death until you get it.
That is the only benefit I see to Mr. Madris being on the roster, is that we get to make those kind of jokes until he's gone the way of other people we've acquired from that area of the world.
Fun fact is the same director, Michael Curtiz, also directed Robin Hood and White Christmas and Casablanca. Talk about three very different movies from one director. Here we are.
That was back in the era, right, where directors just did what the studios told them, right?
For the most part, Curtiz is actually kind of credited to being one of the first sort of Spielbergs where he was allowed, and he did a lot of things that, in fact, you can watch Spielberg films, like the shot in Raiders when you see Indiana Jones's big shadow. That's a ripoff of Curtiz out of Robin Hood and Casablanca. But so he was one of the few that really broke away from. But yeah, to your point, everybody else, it was a 9-to-5 job, and the studio system was a thing. So we are off the rails, boys and girls.
Yeah, we almost started talking about baseball for just a second, then get right back off.
So your podcast for 1940s Hollywood information, Go Astros.
Here we go.
Yeah, we got a new tagline for us. So
next week, Ingrid Bergman, hottie or super hottie? So we'll dive in. Yeah.
Absolutely. By the way, super hottie because I have seen Casablanca, and can't believe Rick left her.
Yeah.
But instead of talking about Bligh Madris for 30 minutes, which apparently we could do, most of the episode is going to be a theme episode here. And the topic that we came up with to talk about was, what is the best moment in Astros history? And as we sort of thought about this here, we have sort of 8 candidates, 2 from 4 different eras of sort of Astros playoff success. I guess the first observation to make is the first thing we came up with on this list is from 1986. That's the second playoff appearance. The second playoff appearance. It's just hard to have really memorable moments when you are 81 and 81 every season like they were throughout the 70s. You just really can't you need to be successful to really have moments that people remember. And I think we're old enough and we know enough about the Astros to have known what happened in the 60s and the 70s. And there's just not a lot to sort of sort through there saying, yes, here's the thing people remember from 1968 or from 1976. James, does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess didn't Joe Morgan win a World Series for someone else in 76, or was it 77 that he won one with Cincinnati? So 76, I mean, that happened.
75 and 75, you had the game-winning hit for not the Astros.
Not the Astros. So yeah, I mean, you're right, and I think it's interesting too because we're all of us on the show are roughly the same age, but the amount of age difference was so big when we were younger. So like you have y'all's memories of 80 are probably similar to how my memories of 86 are, where your memories of 86 are much more solid and much more specific. And I think it's sort of interesting how we're all close in the same age, but our view of that early, or I guess that middle period of Astros history is very different.
Well, in the history up until, in the early 80s was that the Astros are going to play the best playoff series that you've ever seen. We're not going to win any of them.
Yeah.
But for a long time, the NLCS in 1980 against the Phillies was considered the best playoff series ever. And then the 86 NLCS against the Mets was considered the best playoff series ever, soon to be overtaken by that Boston Mets thing that happened a few weeks later.
We were the Red Sox of the NLCS.
100%.
Yeah,
but
very
that was
exciting, very dramatic. You want to talk about it, and also easy to bet on.
That's a lot of what we hung our hats on, though. Advancing to the playoffs was cool in '80, but that's hopefully we'll win a game someday. Hopefully we'll win a series someday. Who knows? It's all heady. And it took, until our 57th year, as we all know, to really make a lasting impact from a standpoint of winning championship level baseball. Because I think as we look back, the late 90s and the early mid 2000s, we were close, but I don't think that we were really capable of winning. Certainly we didn't win, but I don't know that we were capable of winning.
What's interesting though about that is if history is a funny thing, we can be really arbitrary about how we draw it up. And if we really actually look at Astros baseball from 2005 to now, even though that middle run in the rebuilding year was awful, it's actually a really pretty good consistent run if you were to sprinkle those playoff appearances in this sort of less than 20-year period. It's just when you endure it game by game like we do, that middle run was pretty awful.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe it as consistent, because you had we talked about this back in the summer. The team went over 500 for its all-time record.
Right.
And
I guess what I'm saying by consistency, Brian, 2006, is the three of us don't see it as consistent, but somebody say, hey, look, the Astros made the playoffs 8 times in 20 years. That's pretty good.
Yeah, because we're not the Rangers. I mean, we're not the Rangers. We're not just going to, show up once every 20, 30 years, make the playoffs, and then disappear again.
Yeah, no, there's a big nadir, but coming out of it. And that's a good preview to sort of the 4 eras we'll talk about. We'll talk about 1986, which Andy mentioned. We'll talk about 2004, 2005, the LCS appearances against the Cardinals and the World Series appearance. And of course, the 2 title teams, 2017 and 2022. But let's start with 1986, which to Jim's point, I was 13 that year, turned 13 that year. That's the year I really feel sort of sealed me as a baseball fan, as an Astros fan. And plus my 8th grade history teacher, my favorite teacher, Mr. Villamagna. Shout out Mr. Villamagna, was a Mets fan, so I had great fun. My friends and I talking smack to him throughout the LCS, and not a lot of fun eating crow the day after
I bet not,
Game 6. But it allows us to get sort of the 2 moments that are part of this. One is the Mike Scott no-hitter, which clinched the American League West title, the National League West title. We were in the National League then. It's a long time ago. And the other would be the Billy Hatcher home run in that memorable 16-inning Game 6. That's back when we played really long playoff games and didn't hit game-winning home runs, but hit game-tying home runs. Of these 2 moments, Andy, I'll start with you. 1, what are your memories of those specifically? And 2, which is the moment that stands out more in your head?
Well, I mean, personally, I was a sophomore in high school when 1986 happened. And so Mike Scott's no-hitter, this is one of those events in Astros history that everybody at some point will tell you they were at that game.
That was going to be my joke, you asshole.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, but I actually was at that game because I had skipped school. Sorry, Mom and Dad. But we went to go see that game because I think it was a late afternoon, like a 3:00 start for TV, playing the Giants. Hated Will Clark and Kevin Mitchell and some other guys on that team. So just hoping to have a continued run of good pitching, because up to that point, Jim Deshaies had struck out the first 8 batters in a game 2 games before, and then Nolan Ryan had an incredible start the day before, and then now we've got Mike Scott ready to clinch a division series. And that was the hope. I was just hoping to see that we might clinch, maybe play well enough to clinch and fall short, because that would be our history. I remember that game because I was there, but I think for me, the Billy Hatcher home run was more impactful from a standpoint of, and it's weird because this is just Astros fandom, it's a game we lost. It's a game that did not go well and everybody was miserable at the end of. But it was a moment that probably up until 04 or 05, the Astros community as a whole hung their hat on as, hey, we're never going to give up. We're always going to keep fighting. And that's, when you don't win, that's who you are. You're that team. You're either lovable losers or you're just going to keep fighting. And we're fighting and we're just so close. And that was that. I remember being in school. The game was probably still going on after, certainly was going on after school had ended, but we were all kind of in TVs on carts at that time.
Yeah.
VCRs, carts, TV, in the old gym, kind of circled around. They had the game playing over the loudspeaker during football practice, so you could hear what was going on. So the whole community was engaged. And this was still in Oilers town. So for us to really get interested in baseball as a group was a big deal for me. And I think that was the memory that I have. And honestly, that Hatcher home run was something that we talked about for 20 years after it happened, even though it was a losing effort.
Just to having checked the facts here, Andy, you were joined by 32,808 people that day at the Astrodome. And
in a stadium that held 52.
Mm-hmm.
But 100,000 were there.
Yeah, everybody you meet will tell you, we were there.
My dad said he was there, but he's a liar, so I don't know if.
But he also worked security for the Astrodome, didn't he?
He did for a time, yeah.
For HPD, so he could have been there.
He could have, yeah. He could have been in bed with another woman too, but this is not my therapy, Brian. That's what I've.
We all could have.
Well, if you're going to continue with that, I'm going to charge you $150 an hour.
Please,
so,
please
that's
do.
actually cheap. Shit.
It's pretty good, actually. Do you take Blue Cross or no? Okay.
So I got to see what I can get set up here, but that's its own. That's its own sort of separate thing here. So Andy, you have a strong vote here for the Hatcher home run, which I think sort of, I mean, for me, both of them were afternoon games. Both of them I remember sort of like trying to run off the school bus. I was in 8th grade, so I was still, on a bus and trying to run home and sort of getting the TV on. And since it wasn't, our younger listeners won't understand this here, since it was before the days of instantaneous communications technology, had no idea what was happening, that it was still a no-hitter.
Right.
When I got radio, that's how you got your news, was the radio.
Yeah.
And I think the Chronicle and Post were still doing an afternoon edition at that point. So maybe if something hit by about 2, you could see it at 4.
Yeah, the Chronicle was the afternoon paper. The Post was the morning paper at that time. I forget when the Chronicle shifted over to morning.
That's also the time when you didn't have the graphics up all the time. So you could turn a game on and watch for minutes and have no idea what was really happening until, oh, here's a graphic. Okay, we know what's happening. We're old men. We are old men.
And Bob Nepper was on the roster to fit with our, 3 guys who remember Bob Nepper. And
it was one of the even years, so he was good.
He was good.
Well, that's kind of how we had lots of players have really good years that year who sort of played above their level, because part of 86 was the Astros were nowhere close to being a favorite to win. The Dodgers seemed to be the big rival. That was the moment when sort of for the most part, the Giants took over as the second best team or the best team in the division, thanks to guys like Will Clark, who I both the jerk and really wish the Astros had drafted him.
And Brian, I think we need to mention that for the kids listening, at that point we were in the National League West. You want to know who else was in the West then? The Dodgers, the Giants, the Padres, the Cincinnati Reds, and the Atlanta Braves, and us. That was the West. St. Louis, which is farther west than Cincinnati, in the East.
Well, Fay Vincent tried to move the Cardinals and Cubs to the West, and he got fired for his efforts. So
they needed somebody strong like Bud Selig to ruin base. I mean, that's a change.
Well, it's a good reminder that the commissioner does not work in the best interests of baseball. He works in the best interests of his employers, who are the owners.
Who are the owners,
gotten better at understanding, and Rob Manfred certainly making a contribution to that. Let's move to the next era of going to the, at the time, National League Championship Series, which would be 2004 and 2005. And our 2 candidates here are, in 2004, the Jeff Kent walk-off home run, which I think is the first. Hey, we finally hit a walk-off home run. We finally hit a late home run that won a game in the playoffs, which would later become a tradition, but was sort of the first time we'd ever seen that. And part of my memory of this is Jeff Kent, who is an excellent ball player and is a fine candidate for the Hall of Fame, but was never a happy man.
Yeah.
And his massive joy and him flipping his batting helmet as he rounds third and comes into the plate was both so out of character, both for him as a player and for the Astros. And it's that contrast which really sells the moment for me. Jim, I'll start with you. Your sort of assessment of these two, and then of course,
Look,
what really wanted a tractor.
Obviously, the Chris Burke home run is famous for lots of things, including Alan Ashby forgetting how to be a color analyst on a radio broadcast and stepping all over Milo Hamilton's call. However, for both personal reasons, and I think to your point, Brian, I think Jeff Kent's home run to me sticks out. One, as I recall, Chris Burke's home run was kind of front row, the Crawford boxes situation.
Yes.
Jeff Kent's was a laser. I mean, it was off the bat. But there's a couple of personal things about it too, is it's actually the first playoff series that I got to watch post Army. So I was actually able to sit down and watch all of it. And I was watching with some people who were not baseball fans at the beginning, but were super excited when Kent hit the home run. So I think it kind of announced that the Astros were, at least for those 2 years, back. Of course, we know how 2005 began, but I would go with Kent's, and I know it's sort of counterintuitive because we would lose to the Cardinals in the next series, but that home run just was women ovulated. That's all I'm saying.
Andy,
I did not ovulate, and I think for me it's the Kent home run as well. To Brian, to your point, the happiness, the joy that Jeff Kent exuded as he came home rounding third led him to get a nickname on one of my former employers, Kevin Scott's Astros Connection, rest in power, where I was a moderator, and we nicknamed him Blue Bonnet because he literally skipped into home plate after he threw his helmet. I mean, he was so joyous. And still, and I've got to say now with what happened in November, up until this past November, that was probably the biggest home run in my mind that the Astros has ever hit in the postseason. That was the loudest I had ever heard Minute Maid Stadium get. And it was because of a fan base that was not as jaded. And we are a little bit jaded right now when you make 5, 6 ALCSs and 4 World Series and you win 2 of them. It's a different kind of crowd now. And it's great. And we're all into the game. I don't think it's anything like that. But that point, we had a history of always losing series. And we had finally beat the Braves that year. But then we're struggling with the Cardinals, and that game put us up 3-2. We know how that series ended with us losing again.
Yeah.
But that was probably the most joyous moment of that Biggio Bagwell era, and unfortunately, it came at the end of that Biggio Bagwell era.
We had on Let's Get To, we had Bobby Dynamite on, the famous Astros train guy, and I had him compare that home run to Bregman's walk-off, and he said the home run, the train was shaking and he was in fear for his life. Like he really thought that the train was going to come down. And he said, obviously it's been loud through this era, but that moment, to your point, Andy, he felt like he might've died on that train. So I think to your point, it's just a crazy moment in our history.
Well, I think part of what all this speaks to is the Astros playoff history from 80 and 86 and 96 and, through that era, and especially with the 98 team, which was this outstanding team, they'd go to the playoffs and terrible and bad things would happen to them because A, they couldn't hit, and B, weird, strange, odd things would happen that would just, break your heart out. So you expected to lose. And that, Chris Burke hit this home run that you were able to, that Brad Ausmus hit the home run to get us there.
Yeah.
Which is maybe more.
And Berkman hit one off of Mark Wohlers, I think, somebody he wasn't supposed to be able to hit into the Crawford boxes to get us close. I mean, there was a lot going on in that game.
Yeah, and then there wasn't for there was a lot going on through 9 innings, and there wasn't until the 18th. And so the 2004 run was just so different from what we'd expected from the Astros in the playoffs. And more of that carried over into 2005. And actually, one of my favorite memories is I was teaching an adjunct at Austin Community College at the time. I was in grad school. And I gave an exam that day, and one of my students came up to me, handed the exam in, and then said to me, "Please don't grade this tonight during the game." And I turned to her and I said, "I respect baseball too much to do that to you." So didn't grade that night. Had my heart in the throat for Game 7 and didn't work. But that allows us to turn to a more successful, as sort of Andy sort of previewed, a very sort of different set of Astros postseasons, which is the run we've been in since 2017. 6 straight ALCSs, 4 World Series appearances, 2 World Series wins. Again, are we a dynasty is a live question, and I think the answer to that is yes.
I think it's yes too, because I consider the Braves a dynasty, and they only won one. I mean, baseball's just different. Before you dive into this, Brian, to your point, I kind of still expect us to lose all the time. Just ask Andy's text messages. I just really
he does.
I mean,
What were you doing when Schwarber hit the home run in Game 6?
I was
Planning for Game 7.
Planning for Game 7. Look, if you expect the worst, you can't be disappointed.
Well, let's talk about the moment that broke that. So in 2017, in 2005, as you know, we got to the World Series, and hey, good news, we lost by the least of any team that's ever been swept in the World Series. So that's not a thing, right? In 2017, we finally make the World Series. We lose 3 straight in Yankee Stadium, come back. Verlander throws the great game in Game 6, and then McCullers throws the 24 curveball, straight curveball.
Which has gotten him paid twice, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then we get to go to the World Series, go out to Dodger Stadium, lose Game 1, and we are losing Game 2 until we get to the 9th inning. And I'm not sure he's the least likely, but close to the least likely guy in that lineup to hit home run, particularly off Kenley Jansen, is Marwin Gonzalez.
But before you get to look, I hate to cut you off, but I'm the storyteller here. Yeah, before you get to Marwin's home run, you're forgetting JV coming out in like the muscle shirt with the weird shoulder hair, yelling at all these guys that you guys can hit the baseball. And I don't know. We've talked about whether baseball is an emotional game that way or not. Can you try to hit a home run? I don't know. But as far as we're telling stories, that's a big part of that, just from a dramatic point. Not unlike the Bears, the Bills having a kickoff return last night, and it's been 3 years and 3 months since that return. But anyway, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it was a little bit like Buttermaker coming out of the dugout and throwing a beer at one of his pitchers. It was emotional and drove the story, sure. Verlander also looked like, for all the world, like, how in the world do you score Kate Upton with that shoulder hair? I'm
telling you, this shoulder hair.
You have enough money for electrolysis. Laser hair removal, whatever it takes, you could get it all done.
Between the shoulder hair and the bald spot, we have learned that Justin Verlander in a baseball uniform looks awesome, looks handsome, and looks like a guy who can win Kate Upton. And then when he takes that off, Lord Isabel. By the way, why didn't Kate get him that electrolysis?
I mean, maybe she did at this point.
I mean, have you seen what Verlander wears? It's very clear he's being influenced by a model.
Yeah,
sure.
And
maybe she's got the whole 70s Burt Reynolds thing going on.
Maybe the answer is not that Justin Verlander scored Kate Upton. It's that Kate Upton is an angel and took pity on Justin Verlander.
Maybe.
Well, first of all, Kate Upton would take pity on any man she ended up with, because, well, none of us deserve her, much less, no. 2 times, 3 times Cy Young Award winner, even though he's got as good a shot as anybody.
I'm gonna miss her.
My reaction to both to the Marwin home run and then to the agony of the 10th and the 11th in that Game 2 is just like, we've never won a World Series game. This is how hard it is to win a World Series game. You just have to go through this agony to win a World Series game. And I just felt so much relief at the end of that game. And I don't know if this is the best moment, but this is the one that sort of stands out to me as being one of my personal favorites on this list here. Andy.
Are we talking about Bregman yet, or are we still talking about Marwin?
Whichever you prefer.
So I think for me, it's kind of how a franchise grows up. So we talked about 80 and 81 as first steps, and you're still hopeful. And 86 started to really, for Jim, the first time. For us, it might have been more of a crushing blow because it's just continuation. And then we saw 97, 98, 99, 01, 03, 04, and 05 all end in heartbreak of some varying degrees. And 05 being swept in the World Series, I'm realizing now that every franchise at some point, even the Yankees, went through this. At some point, you never won a playoff series.
Right.
There's one team that won their first playoff series. I don't know who it was, but there was One team. Brian's going to look it up. I see his eyes going.
The Highlanders were terrible for the first
Exactly.
20 years.
But at some point, somebody was sitting around the Bronx going, my God, we're never going to win a playoff series. Where there's no way we're going to beat the Bean Eaters or whatever the hell they were called at that point. And that Marwin Gonzalez home run, that winning game 2 in the World Series, that was the next step in my mind. Okay, we had at some point never won a playoff series. Then we won a playoff series, but we never advanced past the Classic Series. Okay, we did that, but then we got swept in the World Series. Now we finally won a World Series game. Maybe in 10 more years, we can win 2 World Series games. But I think what that did was just set the plate for Game 5 of that series. Because for me, after Game 5, it was inevitable we were going to win. It was just a matter of doing it in 6 and doing it in 7. And I think 6 just wasn't going to line up well for us with all the things going on. But that game, I remember watching it from a hotel room in Austin. And I have this horrible routine I'm sure I talked about before. When things go bad, I have to turn off the TV to reset the game. I know there is no logic behind this. I'm fully aware it is an emotional, stupid decision that I make, but I make it constantly. And I turned that game off 6 times.
Yeah.
And then I had, of course, game day running. So we got base runners on. Let's get back on. And that was a game after we had tied it up the second time that I just couldn't turn off anymore. Springer loses that ball in the outfield and comes back and hits a home run right at the very next at bat.
And hits the fireworks, right? Like made it look like
first pitch too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it was just this war of attrition. And somehow you knew that Bregman was going to come through. I didn't know it was going to be a single, but Derek Fisher's claim to fame is that he was really fast and got on base. And that's what we needed. And that was the first time I truly believed, after 10 years old or 9 years old, that we were going to win a playoff series. We were going to win a championship, because when you're 9, you believe you're always going to win. It's just a matter of it's our turn.
Right.
Age and time had beat me down to the point that was never going to happen. But 2017 proved it wrong. And that's the thing I think, not that I want to talk about all the things around 2017 right now. That's the thing I think that fans outside of the city don't understand, is it doesn't really matter the circumstances of how we won that title or how we got to the playoffs of that year, because we won. We finally broke that. That's so Bregman's is the bigger deal for me out of these 2.
Jim?
Well, it's interesting because Jessica, my wife, did not grow up an Astros fan. She just grew up a Cubs fan, but we sort of horse traded when we got married. I tricked her into saying, sure, I'll give up the Rockets. Yeah, I don't care about basketball. So she couldn't understand, though, really and truly, after Game 2, I almost had contentment. I almost felt like, because you talked about the 05 World Series, Andy, and I was still celebrating being in the World Series, and then it was over. Like I have no cognitive recollection of most of those games. And when we beat the Dodgers in Game 2, it was like, that's a monkey off the back. Maybe we're still going to lose this World Series, but I especially thought after Game 4 that, well, you can't lose at home. But the Game 5 experience, from me turning into a nervous wreck to Jessica and my cousin lighting a bonfire in the backyard and listening to Robert Ford for the rest of the game, recording it so we could go back and watch it if we won. I'm with you, Andy. Whenever Derek Fisher crossed the home plate, I knew we were winning the World Series. I didn't know how I was going to go down the rest of the way. I wasn't even worried about Game 6 so much. I just knew it was going to happen. And to me, I think it's maybe arguably the biggest base hit or the biggest hit in Astros history. I think it did everything to get them off the deck, which is something that we had always been close to doing, but not quite doing it all the way. And I think you can't understate how big that was.
How much? So that hit happened after midnight here on the East Coast, and I stayed up till 3 a.m. I just couldn't go to sleep. I was too excited. I was
vibrating. I don't even know that I slept. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and I think I had to get up and go teach the next morning. I didn't care, because it was just, and part of it was, it's this remarkable and frankly ridiculous game, 13-12, right? It's a football score. But it just sort of capped off both this game and also the sense of how different this franchise was than what we'd seen in the previous series, that they could keep taking blow after blow and come back from it. They could get behind and come back. They could go ahead, lose the lead, and still come back. It's both a different vibe on what this team is. And
we were down by 4 runs twice in that game.
Twice.
with
It
Kershaw,
also was the other thing that was interesting for me too is it just really showed you how much the game of baseball has changed, because we talked about already a lot of extra inning games that were 3-2 or whatever it was. I mean, like you said, Brian, this is a football score, which you didn't really see a lot of until this sort of generation of baseball now, where all we care about is offense.
Well, and also when Manfred started juicing balls so somebody could hit home run records. What?
What's that?
That's it's a regional game. We don't make changes at parks.
Speaking of 2022, hey,
Yeah.
we won the World Series in 2022, which James can confirm because of his shirt, because of his sweatshirt.
I've got enough to wear the next eight Go Astros. I'm going to be rocking something World Series. So,
all right. And there are 2 really good candidates here. And what prompted sort of me to think about this here is Joe Panansky is writing a book about the best moments in baseball. He put out a poll on his website for each team and their best moments. And the nominee he had for 2022 was Yordan's walk-off in Game 1 against the Mariners. What was not on the list was Yordan going over the batter's eye. This game is turned upside down in Game 6. My vote is for, I thought that was wrong. I thought that the Game 6 home run to essentially win the World Series, to turn it over to the bullpen to give Fromber the win, was the bigger hit. As fun and as awesome and as many times as I've watched it, and as much as I was cackling as Yordan hit the home run against the Mariners in Game 1, I think it's the Game 6 home run in the World Series. Andy, what's your?
Well, let me ask you just to get your mindset before you go to Andy. So you felt like even if we lose Game 1, we're going to beat the Mariners. You were very confident in beating the Mariners.
Yes.
Okay.
And and part of it's, I think, a very different thing, like in Game 6, right? You go to Game 7 and Lance had a bad start before, and they should probably start Javier, but he would be on shorter rest. And then you've got to figure out how to use the bullpen. And it's one game that's a coin flip, you're favored, but
and we know about the injuries afterwards that a lot of those guys wouldn't have. Okay. I think it's fair. It's fair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Andy, your vote among those 2.
I don't know how you walk away from the idea that winning a World Series with a home run that hit 450 feet away to dead center above the batter's eye, and I think took out a guy that was sitting up there. These are not tickets that you buy hoping to get souvenirs. These are tickets that you buy hoping to get good beer service. And I love that we beat the Mariners the way we beat the Mariners, but I think if we had not hit that home run in Game 1, we still win that series because we were just better than the Mariners. And I don't care what my Mariners, the 2 Mariners fans who listen to this show have to say about that. They are not.
Appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks for listening.
100%. But the Mariners last year were not ready to move past where they did. Great season for them. Good job. Happy to beat them. But even if we had lost Game 1, we were still going to win that series. We have recent experience in the World Series that says we don't always win when we're the better team. And as we were the better team than the Phillies. And when Schwarber hit his home run in the 6th inning, I believe, to go up 1-0,
top of that inning.
Yeah, it felt like that's not great. We're gonna, we're running into the same thing we ran into against the Nationals 3 years ago. So immediately coming up the next series of at bats and Yordan turning the game upside down. I know it won't get this run because of what baseball is now, but to me, yes, it's the bias of being an Astros fan. That's one of the great all-time calls. For this game.
It's unique. We've never heard that one before.
Yep.
And I don't know if it'll be a national signature for Joe Davis, but it'd certainly be a signature in Houston among Astros fans.
And it
felt very genuine too. Like it felt like there was nothing pre-programmed about it. It felt like he was as into the game as we were, and that's what happened.
And I don't hate Joe Buck like some people do, but I'm glad it wasn't Joe Buck in the booth, because we would have gotten something about Yordan's age. And yep, there it goes. And
Another Cuban Missile crisis.
yeah, so Joe Davis did us a favor there. I mean, just the importance of what that home run was, and breaking that streak and breaking that, the stuff that some of us all believe that, well, we're playing another NL East team with 80 some odd wins as heavy favorites, and we're going to lose again. That was huge. And rightfully, wrongfully, however you want to view it, it did legitimize a lot of other things that have happened for the Astros since 2015. So I think it's a big deal.
Yeah, and getting the second World Series title really sort of, again, it leads to discussion that we've had a little bit here. Is this a dynasty? But it really puts a cap on that this is a great team, and a team that will be remembered, the Altuve era Astros, that will be remembered 20, 40, 60 years from now as something people have to remember. And that's,
and if nothing else changes, our window's still open for at least 2 more seasons.
Yeah,
if not more, but not talking contracts, all that other stuff. It's the middle. It could be the middle chapter.
Yeah,
and that's cool. 3 is better than 2.
Yeah, 2005 certainly felt like it was close to the end.
Yes,
I don't think I quite felt it was the end at that moment, but it certainly felt like, okay, this is the mountain we've gotten over.
Even Yankee fans would have to agree the empire struck back. You know what I'm saying?
Well, if you look at 04 and 05 and the people that you would think were leading that team, none of those moments have anything to do with Craig Biggio or Jeff Bagwell. In fact, Bagwell wasn't playing by the time the 05 World Series came around, and barely played in any of the playoff games prior to that. So there's still a lot of life in the Astros team going forward, which is encouraging and fun.
Yeah, I mean, the moments from 2004 were Chris Burke, who was a short timer. He was a regular for only a short period of time, and from Jeff Kent, who was a free agent rental for also a short time. And the thing about both 2017 and 2022 is these are sort of our guys that we developed, we brought up, we followed as minor leaguers. Particularly in 2017, it's a lot of guys who are like, okay, I'm putting up to these 100-win seasons. I hope these minor leaguers, that these guys who were out there, and we got this Bregman guy in the draft, and we got this, I don't know where we found this Marwin Gonzalez guy, but he's going to, we found sort of these guys who became our guys in a way that I think is very different than Jeff Kent. And, right now we'll see sort of long term, but I mean, Marwin Gonzalez will always be identified as an Astro despite having played for other teams. Alex Bregman, the same thing, despite, no matter sort of what happens. Jeff Kent's a Giant, right? And he played for a ton of teams.
Yeah.
Jeff Kent was a Blue Jay when he debuted.
Wasn't he a Met for a while? I think he was.
Yeah, he was traded for David Cone, I believe, between the Mets and the Blue Jays. Or if not David Cone, then some pitcher, and then was with Mets to the Indians and Indians to the Giants for Matt. Anyway.
And this last,
it's interesting though, like,
because last 15 seconds is as much Jeff Kent run as he's gotten on the internet in a while.
But it's funny because, like, I'll play devil's advocate on the home runs because I agree. It's Yordan's. The game is turned upside down. We all, especially when what we heard after the game, when we knew that maybe 3 guys weren't going to play, Machete, Bregman. So, but I think we can't understate. There's the emotional comeback thing, and then there's we all know how baseball works. That's a big comeback to bring up in a playoff game, and for Yordan to hit the ball the way he did, as hard as it was, as high as it was, it's interesting that those are the top 2 moments, because I probably would agree with them that's being debated. And to me, it felt like this is the way a World Series run starts. And then to run through the American League playoffs without losing a game after that, I think really, really cemented us on the trajectory that we were on. And the World Series was dicier. It felt dicier because it really wasn't, right? Like, it felt dicier because the Phillies came back in game 1.
Yeah.
And which is as equally an improbable comeback as the Astros had against the Mariners. But I think just what a way to start a very dominant World Series run than to do that to the team that really thinks they're our rivals, and they aren't.
Yeah, it was, I think that certainly fits in with sort of the narrative, and particularly you sort of look at the national guys looking at that at that moment, or what they wrote the next day. It's like, oh yeah, this is kind of what the Astros do. And one of the things I think we can sort of bring this back full circle here as we need to wrap this up here to when is for essentially the first, up until 2017, the image of the Astros nationally was as vanilla as possible.
Not just because of the uniforms at the time.
No, but in some ways, the most exciting thing about the Astros were the uniforms. Were that, hey, here's what you've invented. You've invented indoor baseball. Here's what you're really known for: indoor baseball and the tequila sunrise.
And then we had black pinstripes.
Yeah, and for some reason,
because baseball.
Yeah, because baseball, because Drayton, because anyway, and it was, there was sort of nothing that really sort of stood out. Hey, one reason why people hate us so much, one reason why there's so much negativity is we win so much. We didn't like the Cardinals for years because A, they're a division rival, but B, because they were really good. And we didn't really care about the Cincinnati Reds because they pop up every once in a while in our division, but we didn't sort of have that. In '86, I went to a game where we played the Dodgers. We had a big comeback late. There was some controversy. Tommy Lasorda ran out to argue at the umpire, and I assume it was 30,000 people in the dome that night, booed like crazy against Tommy Lasorda, and that was great fun. It is. We are now hated. We get booed because of the sign stealing scandal, but we also get booed because I'm just sick of seeing Jose Altuve in the playoffs. And you know what? I, as an Astros fan, am not sick of seeing Jose Altuve in the playoffs.
Jose Altuve is Steve Curry or Steph Curry, right?
Yeah.
Like we're the Golden State Warriors, because it isn't just we're good and we're doing it different, and people are trying to catch up.
Yeah. And that's, again, it's a testament to, one thing to think about sort of in this list here is what sort of, recency bias will the stuff we're thinking about now hold up. But the thing is, of course, it's the 2 World Series titles. It's the particular memories of this. And with modern social media, I think to Astros fans, this game is turned upside down as something that they will hear. And that, frankly, some 5-year-old boy who doesn't know about that right now will hear that on social media throughout his life. Or a 5-year-old.
We're even going to reveal a T-shirt based on that idea I'm working on. So, yay.
Please make it big and tall so I can buy it from you. Well,
you got it.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be my gift.
Okay. So we're going to let people weigh in between the 4 candidates we picked from these eras here on Twitter. So I will post a poll of these 4 on Twitter, and we will see what people sort of think about between the Billy Hatcher home run, between the Jeff Kent walk-off, between the Alex Bregman single, and between the Alvarez Game 6, this game is turned upside down home run. What y'all think is the best moment in Astros history? We are on here because it's the off season, every 2-week schedule. So we will be back on, today is the 9th, so we will be back on January 23rd, and may do a theme show like this, or who knows, may do more exciting breakdowns of Bly Madris or whoever they get to occupy the 40th spot on the 40-man roster. Which middle reliever should be the last man on the roster could be a big topic for us then, but we'll figure that out then. Right now, it was really fun to talk about these moments in Astros history and to talk about our particular memories of it, to get us 3 guys who remember Bob Knepper. James.
All I got to say is I hope I'm on the next show. I'm taking 14 film students to LA for a week. Pray for me, and go Astros.
Andy.
I have not been hired by the Dodgers to skirt rules of Major League Baseball so far. Go Astros.
And hey, we will post this here, but hopefully it doesn't take 14 votes to figure out a winner of our best moment in Astros history poll. Go Astros.